We might just kick off now. So my name is Susan Pincus and I'm the National Careers Professional at the College of Law. And I am delighted to have you join me today to discuss the topic, opening doors as an international student in Australia. Finding your feet and starting your legal journey is hard for all law students and graduates, but international students face additional challenges. In this session, we will explore some of those challenges, but also how our wonderful panelists, Elva Zhang and Maggie Wang, overcame them to establish successful lives and careers as lawyers. So welcome to the College of Law and day 4 out of 5 of our 5th annual Careers Academy, a fully virtual and national careers festival providing you with tips, strategies, and ideas on pursuing your legal career from experts across the legal industry. I would like to acknowledge all of the traditional custodians of the lands we are all present on today and any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are participating in this event. I pay my respects to each of the elders past, present and emerging. Before I pass over to Elva and Maggie, a few housekeeping matters. We have allocated 15 minutes of questions at the end of the session. However, you're welcome to enter your questions via the Q&A function during the session, in case you forget, and we'll all do our best to answer them. All our webinars are recorded and you'll receive an email with all the Academy recordings in the next week or so. We would also appreciate it if you could take the time to complete a quick survey on the session and any ideas you may have for other webinars via the link I'll put into the chat box. Let me introduce you to our panelists and share a little of their background. Elva Zhang. Formerly an international student from China, Elva is an Australian qualified lawyer with a Masters of Law from the Graduate Institute in Geneva, Switzerland. Elva has been predominantly working in the maritime industry and international trade and currently works as senior counsel for an Australian-based international shipping company. Outside law, Elva also has a passion for neuroscience and mindfulness, and she curates and facilitates workshops by combining the contemporary brain science with the ancient experiential practices to help other lawyers and law students manage stress, cultivate well-being, and reach optimal brain performance. Welcome, Elva.
Thank you.
Maggie is a family law and civil litigation solicitor in Melbourne. She completed her graduate diploma of legal practice at the College of Law and the work experience component through her previous job as an energy and resources law paralegal. She's also a student ambassador for the college. She holds a Masters of Law from the University of Melbourne and a JD from the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Before moving to Australia, she had worked in Hong Kong for law firms and for a policy research centre. Maggie is fluent in Mandarin and Cantonese. So welcome, Maggie.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I am going to kick off by asking you both a question to give our audience an overview of your background, including how you came to Australia from overseas. So Elva or Maggie, whoever wants to kick off, that would be great.
Okay, I'll start. So I came here to study many years ago now as an international student, right after I finished high school in China. And so back then, not many colleges actually receive international students. So I went through the pathway with Trinity College as the foundation course for international students, as part of the program for University of Melbourne. And so I did 1 year with the Trinity, and then I got into arts law at University of Melbourne. And then the rest of story. So I enjoyed studying law, and it was very challenging. I'm sure, this topic we'll discuss a bit later. It was very challenging to study law, especially for someone whose, native language is not English. That being said, now looking back, I'm glad, I do speak another language like Mandarin Chinese, which is quite useful for my today's practice as a lawyer in Australia. And I think you didn't mention that, Susan. I actually left Australia for a bit of a short time, for about 18 months. I went to Switzerland to become international student again. So that was another great experience. I went there to pursue my master's in international economic law. And so I spent 18 months there, and that 18 months gave me a different perspective on being an international student in a very different country. But one thing is common: resilience is required, and no matter which country you go, because there's a lot of challenges we face as an international student, quite different from the domestic students. And then in the past decade, I predominantly practice in shipping industry, which I love, shipping and maritime industry. And currently, as you mentioned, I work as a senior corporate counsel for a Melbourne-based international shipping company.
Thank you. And we'll hear all about how that position came about too. That's an interesting story in itself. And yeah, and apologies for for not mentioning about Switzerland. So in actual fact, yeah, you've had that extra experience as an international student. Maggie, how about you?
So I came to Australia a bit more recently in 2019. So for context, I was born in China and spent part of my childhood in New Zealand, then moved back to China again, finished up high school there at an international school, went to uni in the US, studied environmental policy and economics there, and then did my JD in Hong Kong. So I worked in Hong Kong as a paralegal and also as a senior research assistant a bit later on, before moving to Melbourne in 2019. So I did a LLM at Melbourne Uni, took property law and constitutional law subjects to fulfill the requirements for admission here. So the other basically 11 subjects I was exempted from thanks to the JD in Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. And then while studying, I worked as a paralegal here for an international firm. And then now I am working as a junior solicitor.
That's fabulous. Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to move on to a question around some of the challenges and some of the obstacles that you faced coming from another country. So perhaps you want to just kick off and talk us through what were some of the more difficult times for you.
For me, I guess my experience is slightly different from Maggie, because I came here was undertaking my bachelor degrees. So for me, I think at different phase of my career or legal study, I encountered different challenges and obstacles. Certainly at law school, I think language was a big thing, because law in its by itself is literally, the language is so important. The choice of words can make a huge difference sometimes. And but as an international student from China, I only started learning English when I was 13. I completely underestimated how hard it would be, because I just want to study law, and so that was very challenging. And I always joke about the first class I had at Melbourne Law School. It was torts, and I had no idea what tort was. And I remember sitting there so confused, and I called my mom after my first class. I said, "Mom, I don't think I can do law here, because I didn't know what tort was. That was meant to be the entire semester about." And yeah, my mom just said, "You know what? It's your first class. Go back." And then I went back for the second class. I remember the second class was sitting with an Australian student. I think it was an Australian boy, similar age. He had no clue what tort was. So it gave me a bit of a relief and comfort. I thought,
yeah, definitely.
I was like, okay, I need to stick this out. So I'm glad I didn't give up, after the first class. But leaving the joke aside, it was very hard, because especially when you're studying at Melbourne Law School, at that time I felt like, I was only 18, 19, very young. So the pressure of, understanding, and sometimes couldn't read, the judgment properly. I have to read maybe multiple times, rather than just once or twice. So that was, I think, when I was at uni, at law school, that was the biggest challenge. And later on, when I started looking for jobs, of course, there's a practicality of the visa, for example. And when I was looking for my first lawyer job, and I'm sure a lot of the audience may be in the same boat, I think that was very testy, because you felt, oh, I did my study, I finished my law school, why my domestic counterparts can find jobs so easy, graduate positions, but for me, it's so challenging. And it took me literally 1 year. And also, mind you, when I was finishing looking for a job, that was during the GFC, that shows my age. So it was hard, but then I literally spent a whole year looking for jobs, but in between I did, contracting, I did a paralegal, I did admin works while I was waiting for that opportunity. And then when the first job came up, it wasn't really in the field I was looking for, but it's good I got that opportunity, and that, you got your foot in the door in a way. So I think that was somehow the second challenge when you leave law school, when you're in the real world competing. That's all you need. And for that period of time, I think that emotional resilience, again, is really, really important. Yeah.
Absolutely. So during that year, though, you did take on some different experiences, and one of them was working as a paralegal, in a different area to what you're working in now.
Yeah, no, completely different. So I think the thing is, I felt, it's important not to have a too big gap. So I was doing, paid contracting roles, not really lawyer jobs or, legal jobs, but also doing some volunteering roles as well. So it makes your CV looks, there's consistent flow. You're not just sitting there doing nothing.
Yeah.
But, looking back, those are the two biggest challenges, I would say, in my legal studies and the pursuit of legal careers in Australia.
Absolutely. Okay. How about you, Maggie?
So for me, coming from having done my law degree in another jurisdiction and having some work experience in another jurisdiction, the challenge was to get people here to appreciate that there's relevance in this experience, and you should consider me. And also, a lot of firms were only looking for grads from JD or LLB programs, not so much the LLM program. I'm sure there are reasons for that, but it was a bit of a hurdle for me. And also, like, not knowing people here, not knowing how things work here. So spent some time going to different events and joining organizations and signing up for mentorship programs. I did meet a mentor who was quite helpful in giving me some practical tips and advice about the initial job search process. So that was very nice. And for me, I also spent about a year working in the part-time role and looking for a full-time role. And it didn't help that that's when COVID started in 2020, and everything went into lockdown. There were hiring freezes and a lot of uncertainty. So
yeah, no, absolutely. So we'll talk a little bit later about your mindset and the tenacity and the resilience side of that, because both of you certainly have that in trumps. I just wanted to ask a question, Maggie, in particular to you, because it's more relevant. But when you did your JD in Hong Kong, what was the actual process of getting your overseas qualification recognised by authorities in Australia? Was that quite a complicated process? Just want to maybe talk us through that.
So the first step would be to get the degree assessed by the board that you're interested in. So in Victoria, in the state that you're interested in. And submit the relevant documents and pay the fee, and then they will let you know what more do you need to do in order to get qualified at that jurisdiction. So I found that for Victoria and New South Wales, so I got it assessed in both places. It was a bit easier than New Zealand. So actually it was quite quick, and the amount of documents that I needed to submit wasn't too burdensome. Like, didn't need to get a lot of stuff notarized or original. Like, I think they asked for that a bit later on in the process, like when you actually apply for admission.
Right. So for you, it was really doing those two subjects that you took on. Is that right?
Right. So after getting assessed, they told me, oh, you still need to redo property law and constitutional law, and you need to meet the language requirements and the PLT requirements. Okay. And then, so I was able to go on to do that.
Yeah, but the whole process itself took a few years for you to then be admitted as an Australian lawyer.
Right, and also, organizing my life, moving here, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. So just Elva, before when you mentioned about the language, the difference in language, I'm just interested and curious to know more about how did you start to work around that? So how did you, even like with your written communication when you started as a lawyer, perhaps you can just talk us through that, how you picked it up and what you learned and what tricks you might have.
I have to say, looking back, I think I was very conscious of the fact English was my first language. And it became a kind of emotional baggage even when I was looking for my first job in Australia, because when through law school, I knew it was hard and you write a lot of essays and everything. So I was with a bit of a trepidation when I accepted my first proper legal job. And I was lucky because my first law firm partner, he took me on his wing and he had this beautiful writing. And so I still remember those days when I first joined in the professional setting, all my letter drafting would be just crossed out, all red pens everywhere. Because what you learn in law school, the drafting is very different when in a practicing, environment, writing advice, writing memo, writing the email to your client. So it was needed for me, but also initially my confidence was kind of like beaten down a little bit, like, oh my God. And I remember I had multiple chats with him. I felt like, my English wasn't good enough. Luckily, he was he was very strict in the sense he was very honest in correcting, helping you to improve, but at the same time was compassionate enough. So what I have learned from then on is I would always quite vigilantly read my partners or senior associate, how they write, because I knew, I can learn from them. So that was a habit I picked up. And then when I moved into shipping and my current job, I've been there for many, many years now. My current boss, the general counsel, again, he has this amazing way of writing, very formal, but very professional. And I love the way he used vocabulary, So again, utilizing the skill, just reading whatever he wrote, the email, the letter, everything where I can grab, and also be very honest. I would have multiple chats with him as well. I said, I always worry that English is my first language. And he always joke about, but your English will always be better than my Chinese. So it helped me to have a chuckle. And it's important you have someone, a boss, you can be vulnerable about your deficiency. In this case, for me, the weakness I always carry in my heart is the fact English wasn't my native language, but at the same time, someone you can learn from. So for me, I think, that methodology worked quite well. After about 5 years, literally about 10-year mark, having lived in Australia, studied, worked in Australia, just one day I felt like, oh, I feel my English is now is much better than I was a student, and I think it will come about a time, you'll realize, especially through conversing with many other people, listening to our news, outside your professional circle, you'll pick up that intuition about the language as well. So I think that is the strategy I would definitely recommend if English is not your first language, in your professional setting, maybe find someone you admire their writing and read and copy in a way, initially just their style, then match with your own. And then in the meantime, outside your work, maybe listen to news. I love listening to ABC and SBS because I think their English is really, really good in terms of news reading perspective. And then you just kind of like, get that sense of the language slowly. And you'll come a time, you'll just like me, realize, my English is good enough now, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And so just kept going, didn't you, with that? So once again, you never gave up. It was just
you can't.
no.
Can't give up.
And I mean, in terms of just kind of like working on it, it obviously does take time. So there is that degree of patience that is required. Are there any kind of forums that you might suggest that individuals that maybe do want to work on their English skills, their English language, that you can look into, or would it be more just trying to keep on practicing?
I never joined any forum myself, so that's why I don't have any recommendation from my personal experience. For me, really is talk to people who are native speakers. And as I said, for me, what worked really well is finding that partner, or your boss, your manager, who you can learn from a both professional level, but also, share with them your concern, because I shared very openly about, that vulnerability. I wasn't pretending like, right. I share with both my law firm partner and my general counsel when I was starting out as well. And because then they would help you. They would be more aware of your own, kind of deficiency or your concern. It gave them more avenue and more opportunities to help you improve as well. So in terms of forum group, I'm sure there's other, you can Google, I'm sure there's a meetup for people who want to improve their English. And that could be a great way to do that as well, to make friends and helping you as well. Just in my personal experience, I didn't go down that path. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's a good tip. So in terms of your international background, at the time, did you see it as an advantage or as a disadvantage? And obviously with the benefit of hindsight and with all your experience, it sounds like specifically for you, Elva, that maybe at the time it was incredibly hard, but with your kind of really positive mindset, you see it as being something that obviously was really instrumental in you developing as an individual. Tell us a little bit about that, and Maggie as well. So having come from overseas, like how did you see that in terms of like kind of going out and having conversations with people and approaching the job market, etc.?
Maggie, do you want to go first?
So I would, I think my advantage would be the having some international outlook and experience, facing different types of people, different types of situations, and adapting to those situations. And also the language skills, cultural competence. I think these are all advantages that we could talk about.
At the time, though, do you think that you would have necessarily seen them as advantages, or maybe at the time you were focusing on maybe some of the kind of the gaps for you?
I think I was aware of both.
Yeah.
And it is good to see things objectively, being aware of the advantages and also the disadvantages, like some of the aspects I mentioned in the earlier question about the different qualification and also the experience from another country. And even though I speak English comfortably, there's also like adapting to the environment here. Like, what do people care about? What do they like to? What are some current issues?
Yeah, you raise a really, really good point there. So what about some of those different nuances and some of the things that you noticed when you arrived here? Like even the pace of life would have been so probably quite laid back compared to Hong Kong and China. I don't know. And the people and the culture and yeah. How did you find that?
Yeah, there's some differences. Not sure where to start, but yeah. I did find it helpful to listen more to the podcast from Australia, and also to be intentional in engaging with local people. So perhaps step out of just the university bubble as well, to see if you can become involved in some other groups or organizations in the community. For example, I joined a dragon boat club.
Wow. Yep.
In Melbourne, and so you know, you can look into things like that.
Yeah, so really kind of very much stepping out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
What about Elva for you?
I think for me, I would definitely say when I was an international student studying and when I was in that phase of looking for jobs, I definitely didn't see it was an advantage for me. I saw it was a disadvantage. I was an international student, language barrier, and also, you know, the lack of social network here. And also, you know, at the time I faced the visa condition as well. So personally, you know, I felt, you know, it was quite, I wouldn't use the word soul destroying, but it was kind of like very defeating, because I did carry that kind of sense, like, you know, I've done the same study, I went through law school, I went to Melbourne, but why I can't find a job? So Susan, I was not always so positive. It was actually those periods of darkness made me to realize to master your mindset. But when I was going through that phase, it was actually quite heavy, put this way. So if any one of you who's actually going through that phase, feeling a bit defeated, it's very, very normal. And it's okay. You know, what you need to do, just keep on going, because on the other side of this mountain, it'll be something beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, Elva. And particularly with your studies and your kind of your interests as well in that whole neuroscience area, you probably would have a lot of valuable insights to share on that.
Yeah.
So kind of speaking of mindset then, what did keep you going?
I did a lot of meditation then because I think I needed it. You know, it was interesting. I started meditating while I was at Melbourne Law School because I was stressed out. I realized I need something to cope with the stress, but I was a closet meditator because I was like 15 years ago now, and it wasn't so common, you know, and I didn't want my peers to think, oh, she's a bit weird. She's that weird student from East practicing meditation. It's very different because Melbourne Law School now they openly practicing. You know, I actually did a workshop on Monday about neuroscience for Melbourne Law School, and talking about the benefit of things like this. But you know, back then, you know, that's one thing really kept me. So I started meditating maybe the last year of law school, and then when I was looking for that job, you know, looking for jobs that first year leaving law school, as I said, was very, very heavy, and I felt personally, emotionally was very draining. And one thing it did kept me going was I deepened my meditation practice. So that 1 year, and I found that was my solace at the time. That was one thing really kept me a bit sane. You know, it's hard for me to describe now. So I'm glad, you know, looking back, you know, it gave me a bit more perspective consolidate that practice. And I can always remember those days when I feel like, I need to think about, I need to meditate now, think about those days. It gave me so much solace and peace. So that's the one thing I really recommended. And on the practical human day-to-day level, I think, as Maggie mentioned, you have to network in a way, or socially and professionally. And so it's important, you join meetings if you can, you can meet people, and the beauty of these days is what I didn't have was LinkedIn. Nowadays, I think, you can find people you wanted to have a chat. It doesn't hurt sometimes of saying, I want to have a chat. I was an international student, or someone, you find there may be potential opportunity, or just want to connect without even looking for jobs, just hearing their stories. I think that's a good way as well. You never know how opportunities might come up as well. So that is something I would recommend, with the benefit of hindsight.
So how would you do that, Elva? So if you were an international student, a similar kind of situation to you, and you've arrived here and you're trying, for example, even just to pick up some part-time work as a paralegal, how would you go about that process on LinkedIn? So, almost like kind of sharing your story and finding that common ground.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have LinkedIn back then, so
no.
I was like just sending my CV to seek.com, and that was a bit more laborious, I would say. If I have to do it again nowadays, I think I probably will just put myself out and send something to either the partner or the HR of the firm. Just say, even if they don't have any opening, you might just say, I was international student, and I'm keen to get my foot in the door and have some legal experience in Australia. This is my CV, and put yourself out there. So at least you're at the kind of in the queue. But then maybe next time when they have an opening, they will just consider you, and also make sure in your CV you make certain qualities stand out, like your studies, your background, your resilience, and it's important. I think if I have to do it again, that would be my approach, a bit more proactive as well.
Yeah. So very much kind of also just stressing all those kind of transferable skills and all the skills that you've had to utilize as a result also of having that extra kind of challenges that you dealt with. Maggie, what about you? What kind of kept you going? I think you might have done some meditation as well. I don't know. Is that right?
So I am a Christian, and my faith is very important to me, and I think that is overarching support for me. And in terms of the day-to-day aspects, I think it's important to have goals in mind, but take it one step at a time. And not stress out too much about all the things at once.
Not get too far ahead of yourself. Yeah. Like break it down into bite-sized pieces. And also willing to be flexible. I think that's something that maybe we're all learning during this pandemic. So in terms of job and career, I find it, it's good to be flexible in being open-minded about what you're looking for. And if like, if something is not working out, be willing to try out something else. Yeah, and even like in terms of Elva, when you were saying before that when you started working, you were working in an area of law that really wasn't where you saw yourself long term, but you still took things away from that. And I think, Maggie, so your point is that maybe it's important to have an open mind, and just doesn't matter necessarily where you start. Would that be right? Oh, sorry, Maggie.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. In terms of where you kind of get your foot in the door when you're first starting to get some legal experience or any experience, don't get too caught up in, is it exactly what I want? Would you agree? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Elva, go on.
So add one comment to what Maggie was saying, that flexibility, as you mentioned. I think a lot of times we think work or life in a very lenient fashion, but they're actually not lenient. So what I was, like I said, my first job really was not an area I even foresee myself to practice in the first place. But for example, I took away, learned a lot, like drafting, all these skills, how to talk to client, first experience, working in a firm in Australia. Those are very important skill as well. And what it gave me, the next job, it was when I was looking for my second job. Again, I was very honest with the law firm partner. He was so supportive. He said, do not leave until you find another job. And then when I went for this interview for that second job, he wrote me a letter of recommendation. So I think a lot of times as a human, we're so used to think about life as like A to B, or have to find something perfect. But what if that was that perfection already? Even if from a professional perspective, it wasn't what you're looking for, but it gave you a lot more other feelings, personal growth and experiences. So I think, I completely agree with Maggie, that flexibility, because it's not as straight line as we think sometimes. Yeah. And you don't know what actually it can offer you.
Yeah, very much so. So that's really, really good advice. I was just going to say to people that are listening, our all those present, if you could just start putting some questions together, because we'll open up to questions very, very soon. So if you all want to start putting some questions into the Q&A, that would be absolutely fantastic. Before we do open up to the questions, I've just got a couple of other things I wanted to ask you both. So one of them is around, what would you say to organizations in terms of what kind of diversity brings to the workforce? So employing people like yourself with obviously your language skills amongst all your other competencies as well. What do you see as organizations kind of recruiting individuals from various different backgrounds? How important is that?
I work in shipping. So shipping is very transnational.
Yeah.
And I do think it depends on the industry, the firm you're talking to as well. If you're an international student, my advice is always find a firm, an environment, whatever it be. It could be university, it could be a government, in-house. Find an environment, that the fact you're an international student can potentially be an advantage. So then when you talk to them, you have more bargaining power and you're more confident as well. So for me, I work in shipping maritime. It's essentially, the vessel travel around the world, open sea. So it is by nature, it's very, very very diverse. And just looking at the workforce of my company, it is very multicultural. Then in my case, because again, ships go around the world, and for Australia and China is a very important trading partner. And up to 90% of the goods, coming into and out Australia is carried on vessels. So I know that I have advantage. And this is the point I realized, the fact, before I thought, I don't speak English as my first language was disadvantage. Now I shift my thinking to be that the fact I speak Mandarin as my first language becomes an advantage. So when you can identify, no matter where you're from, you could be from South America, when you can identify a potential employer with that advantage for you, then you can go, you can prove your value, your contribution to their working culture, to their working environment. Yeah.
And Elva, is that something in your role that you're speaking? Do you speak a lot of Mandarin now?
So in my role, I wouldn't say a lot, but then I work very closely with my APAC counterparts.
Yeah.
And I have to say, a lot of our vessel disputes, cargo disputes are involving China. Like the major ones, I'm currently on mat leave, but previously last year, for example, the major vessel dispute I worked on was with our counterparts in China. So it became so convenient. You work with Chinese lawyers, you work with the port authority in China. It's way more efficient for me to converse, to review the documents in Chinese. So, and then you're saving money for the business. They don't have to employ a professional translator because you can do it. And that I would definitely say is a huge advantage. Yeah. So, but I guess I'm lucky in that industry whereby the Mandarin Chinese is very important, so it is important for you to pivot yourself, maybe to identify, where you can somehow bring that advantage to the forefront.
And at the time, was that something that you had considered, or did you think, you kind of almost fell into it, and what a perfect match?
I joined shipping literally as an accident. I didn't plan to do shipping, but it just happened. And again, I felt like looking back, it's great for me. It suits me. And I think I always wanted to work in international economic law because I like that international nature of it. And for someone who has done international law degrees, I felt if you want to work in the private sector, shipping is one of the most suitable ones for me. It's quite international. So it was by accident, but looking back, I think it's quite a nice fit for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And you, Maggie, what about you? And are you using your language skills?
Oh, so first question, I would say that having a diverse workforce will help organizations reach different types of clients,
Right.
and also come up with different ways of thinking and solving problems. And it's good for innovation as well. In terms of me using my skills, so in our team, we work with quite a lot of Chinese clients, and being able to converse with them in their native language, and make the legal advice a streamlined process, and that is very helpful. So yeah, if that's something that some of you are interested in, you could also look for this type of firms or this type of organizations.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. I'm just going to ask you one last question, and then we'll go to questions. And I encourage everyone to ask questions of Maggie and Elva, because we've only got them for another 10 minutes or so. So this is your chance to get those questions that you always wanted to ask. Would you do anything differently with the benefit of hindsight?
Such a philosophical question, Susan.
It is such a philosophical question.
I was just trying to think. Yeah.
I'm so in awe of both of you.
With where I am now, I probably would say no, because I think all paths you traverse gave you something to take away. I'm not saying it was easy. It was definitely very challenging and difficult, especially I think the most difficult year is that transition out from law school when you're looking for jobs. And I don't want to sugarcoat that. That was possibly the most challenging, even more difficult than being in law school study, because you're in a cocoon of university. But when you leave that cocoon, that was the most challenging year. The junior years are more difficult. But yeah, I wouldn't change, because I think, if I can tell that younger self, I think she's done all she can. And with the wisdom she had at that time, I can't judge her based on what I know now. So, but the one thing is, I think, if I could tell her, my younger self, is don't be too hard on yourself and just keep going. Because a lot of times, it is just that when you turn that corner, that opportunity is there. And then you realize, oh, you went through, there's a reason for it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I also love just in your story, part of your story that you've shared with us today is that you also shared your vulnerabilities as well. So when you were kind of working in organizations, you would mention it to your managers as well. So, you were really pretty upfront with them and honest and authentic. So I think kind of that's a really lovely thing as well.
I think when you're honest and authentic,
Mm.
give them the opportunity to reciprocate. There's 95% of the time, I think that worked. Of course, you'll meet someone who doesn't reciprocate at that level. But in my personal experience, most of the times they can reciprocate when you're on with them as well. Yeah.
What about you, Maggie?
I mostly echo what Elva said. I wouldn't want to change a thing. I reckon that things happen the way it did for reasons, for good reasons. Though if I need to offer a piece of advice for someone in the situation that I was in before, it would be to check the language requirement quite early on, check it carefully. So in Victoria and some other states, there are 6 pathways for fulfilling the language requirements. So check which one you might fall under, and if you have questions, you could inquire with the relevant board.
Okay, so do some homework.
And you can prepare well in advance.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move to a couple of questions. I'll just pull them up, and then if anyone else wants to ask something, this would be great time. So this is from Thomas. Thomas says, could you please talk about the differences between starting your law career in traditional law firms and in Big Four like PwC and Deloitte? Would you recommend to start your law career in Big Four, as it seems like they focus on dealing tax business and may lack opportunities for other areas? I don't know, do either of you feel like you want to address that question?
I personally haven't worked in Big Four, but I have friends worked in Big Four. I understand, of course, they have very tax driven kind of focus, but they also have consultancy. My understanding is, a lot of the Big Four now, you might want to check, when they do consultancy, they work more as management consultant kind of perspective. I'm not quite sure necessarily is coming from a lawyer perspective, but they actually do more than just tax and financial services. However, I would imagine, for Big Four, it will be particularly attractive if you want to practice international taxation law. And I have seen friends who worked in Big Four in taxation, in international finance, for example, then transition back to private practice. So it can be done, but you just have to be very mindful, if you want to work in construction, for example, you want to work in employment law, you might need to check whether either, any of the Big Four practice in those areas. They actually do practice a lot more than just taxation, but you just need to be mindful, which area they fit in, but don't. And I would say it's not a bad choice to start from Big Four, because these days in-house, I work in-house, for example, it's quite interesting to see in the past 5 years, a lot more junior positions start opening up for in-house positions as well. And a lot of junior lawyers, they would practice and, first year and second year in in-house setting, then transition back to private firm, which can be done as well now.
Yeah, I mean, those roles working in the Big Four are quite difficult to secure as well. But I mean, they're certainly highly regarded organisations. So I don't really think you could go wrong. So I think that's a really good answer. We've got another question from Natasha. Natasha has asked, when being flexible and applying for jobs which are not necessarily in your field of choice, were you honest with your employer about your long-term goals and desired field?
Maggie, do you want to answer, or do you want to go first?
So how honest were you in terms of your longer term goals? And was that something like in an interview situation, would you have brought it up? It's a hard one.
Still thinking.
Yeah, no, that's all right. No, have a think.
I'll go first, because I went to experience myself.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, I think, Susan, as you mentioned, when do you bring that up? I was very honest with my law firm partner when I had the intention to leave, but that was after about 12 months practicing in that role. And then I told him, it wasn't what I was looking for. And I told him I would prefer to working in areas which is more international, which I can use my Chinese skill, because that was a role in personal injury, and which wasn't really anything I was particularly passionate about. And so the timing is interesting. And I guess I wouldn't raise that when I was being interviewed for the role, because when I was being interviewed for the role, I was being just flexible and open. And then after 12 months, after I giving a good try, and I realized I need to be true to myself. And that was the point. Actually, I opened up to my partner. I told him I didn't want him to be caught in the dark. So I mentioned to him, it wasn't what I was looking for, and in the long term as well. And somehow it worked out in my favor. He was very open. He understood my desire and career ambition, and he supported as well. But my timing was not at the start, but it was after like 12 months, in that role. Then I told my partner at the time.
Yeah,
that's the question. Yeah.
I mean, that really makes sense as well, because you also don't know. I mean, even though you kind of knew that the international area was obviously where you wanted to perhaps focus your efforts, sometimes people do start in an area of law and they actually love it. So I think probably, your strategy and your approach was actually really, really quite wise. Yeah.
I think it's important that to be open and flexible at the start, and then you give yourself a chance. As you said, you might love the area, you don't know, but then if you've tried for, say, 12 months, you realize it's truly not in your heart, then I think it's actually do your favor and do the employers a favor to be open about it. But also you may have gained other transferable experience in that 6 or 12-month period. And then you can even leave with pride saying, I've given a good try and I've gained experiences. And I think that to me is also a better way of dealing with it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So adding to that, in terms of what to talk about at the interview, I would say to focus on so what it is that interested you about this job post, and your goals that do align with what they're looking for. Because if you start from the right off in the beginning saying that, I'm just gonna work here for a bit and leave soon, then obviously that's not gonna work out.
Yeah, or you want to work in a practice area that they don't practice in. No.
Yeah, that would be a bit strange. Like,
so you
would be like, why are you interviewing here?
So you have to be quite strategic as well, and look at it from their perspective, because they are also investing a lot of time and resources in it as well.
And also, I guess you never know. Maybe you do end up enjoying it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if there's any more questions. Let me just check. Okay, yes, there is a question from Lucia. How could you get into the international area of law? Is there anything you recommend to do? So how do you break into international law?
Lucia, so first of all, international area, there's a lot of area of law does have that flavor. So depend upon, when I say international, I guess it depends upon, so for example, shipping is very international. Aviation can be very international. So you have to look for an area which you feel there's a more chance for you to practice in the field where it's more transnational by nature. I would imagine petroleum is very international. So there's no one area, but then certain aspects of a lot of industries can be quite international. Supply chain can be very international. So in terms of to break into those areas, and it depends on whether you want to work for a law firm or whether you want to work for industry. Like myself, I work for industry. If you wanted to work for industry, you find the right area, as I said, aviation, shipping, maritime, supply chain. Then you look for the companies in those fields. and then you can think about how you can go about, as I said, LinkedIn can be a very good way of utilizing it. So if, say, you wanted to get into maritime shipping, there's a few firms in Australia practicing that field. You might want to, reach out to them and, put yourself out there. If you wanted to work in aviation, you sure can find companies working aviation. You might want to put yourself, the CV there. That's how I would do it. So it's definitely a more proactive approach. And also, if you're still studying, think about, the area and subjects you can take. In certain universities, they may teach like international and contract sale, international arbitration, or even international trade law or maritime aviation law. You wanted to take up those area of law subjects, then you can demonstrate you have at least an academic background in those fields if you don't have any practicing experience in those fields.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Elva. Thank you for that. Well, if there are no further questions, I would just like to say a huge thank you to Elva and to Maggie for sharing your time, your insights and your experience. I personally have found you both incredibly inspirational. And I have no doubt that in today's session that a lot of people listening will take away some really kind of significant pearls of wisdom. I am now just going to put into the chat function a link, which is to a feedback survey. So let me just send that one. It might have actually already gone. I think I have sent it to everyone. So hopefully that is the case. I don't know if anyone doesn't have the link, if you could let me know and then I'll send it again. But that's really, really useful for any feedback on today's session and any other ideas you might have. And also, I was just going to add that in addition to the Careers Academy, which is held once a year, we run sessions once a month on all sorts of different topics, and we bring in lots of different speakers as well from the profession. And yeah, don't forget to connect with us. Make sure you're aware of any upcoming events and programs at the college. And we also have lots of different articles that are also posted on the College of Law resources page on our website. So thank you very much for your time and your interest. And no link. Okay. All right. Let me just quickly, I have the link here. So why isn't it sending it? Okay. Sorry, apologies for that. I'm just going to try and cut and paste it again.
If anyone wishes to reach out to connect, as I said, LinkedIn is there. So more than happy for you to connect on LinkedIn as well. So yeah. Okay.
I don't know why it's not letting me send it. How annoying. Okay, well, I think that in that case, the link will be sent to you later on. So I'm not really sure why it's not sending. That's really my poor effort on my part. Thank you, everyone, again. And yeah, wishing you a good afternoon. Thanks very much, Elva and Maggie.
And thank you, Susan. Thank you, everyone.
Pleasure. Bye for now.